Christian, there's a big elephant in the room right now. It's a big elephant in the room.
What's that?
Well, half of it's good, half of it's bad. And for what I'm referring to is the colossal beatdown last Saturday of our Irish.
I forgot about it.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Facebook and everyone else didn't let me forget about it. But you know what? Like I said, there's good and bad. There's good and bad. Obviously, the bad is I don't think Notre Dame left South Bend. The good part is I'm glad Michigan fans are still alive because I hadn't heard from them all year. So welcome back to the college football talk, Michigan fans. And we had your seat right now was a hot fucking seat. There were so many people just aching to come on to be a co-host this week. And I said, not a fucking chance. Not a fucking chance. I mean, I am more than happy to have conversations with Michigan fans about the Notre Dame-Michigan rivalry. I have no problem with that. But when your fandom is just only one-sided, you don't see the other side, and this is the only game you watch for Michigan football, I really don't think we need to have a conversation. But I did want to say thank you, and thank you for everyone that volunteered their time to come on the show. But I wasn't ready for that, and this is it's something it took me a couple days to kind of come to grips to, but it's one of these things where if you are going to put your voice out, if you are going to put the content out, you kind of have to have some thicker skin. So, but yeah, it hit me. It hurt me. I've got great pride.
You know what? Here's how I look at it. Jim Harbaugh, he flat out outcoached Brian Kelly. He stacked 9 guys in the box and said, okay, Ian Book, beat me.
Yep.
Beat me in this weather. Ian Book can't beat you in a dry weather. Okay? Brian Kelly I didn't see any adjustments. I didn't see, they ran all over us. Why didn't we stack the box and say, Shea Patterson, beat us?
Because I'm pretty sure he went like 3 for 10 for 100 yards.
Yeah. Something like that, and it's just I didn't understand that.
There was a lot of that game, and that's one of the things I have written down here. We came out flat and never showed up, and aside from the national title game against Alabama, I don't think I've ever seen Coach Kelly that out-coached, out-schemed, and the team outplayed. So you've got 2 ND fans that are, loyal ND fans, which will both be ND fans after this and further on, that our team fucking sucked.
Yep.
They fucking sucked. They had everything ahead of them. And now, had it been, kind of the game that Kyle and I predicted, a 21-10, 24-14, somewhere in there. All right, I get that. But not, what was it, 45-14?
Yeah.
Unreal. Fucking unreal.
Not my worst day.
No.
Then Notre Dame had the hangover yesterday. They looked like crap yesterday, too. They got lucky at the end, came down, and, thank God.
They couldn't even score on a drive that the refs were giving them. Yeah. I don't understand the play calls. There's a lot of things I don't understand. And when Chris Sims, of all people, is saying, well, this is the reason the Irish are getting just gashed on run defense, you have 5 guys.
Yep. Yeah, and that quarterback wasn't going to beat you with his arm either. He's beating you with his legs.
No, he might beat your ass in the parking lot. Yeah. That's a big dude.
What they say, 250? 6'4", 250? That's a big dude.
Not quite as agile as Cam, but physically probably about the same. Yep. Either that or what was that kid out of Oklahoma, Bill Dozer, something like that.
Yep. He was a tank.
Just a big-ass kid. But yeah, and Michigan obviously didn't have a hangover.
No.
And now one of the greatest intrigues in college football is Maryland at the beginning of the season was scoring 70 every fucking game, and I think that's one of those tales where they came back down to earth. And I kind of expected, if you watch that game, the score was not an indicator of how well Maryland move the ball. They just couldn't. Once
Couldn't
they got in the
punch
red
it in.
zone, they just couldn't do anything with it. So it is what it is, and you know what? At the end of the day, Notre Dame and Michigan both are 2 losses. Both losses are from top 10 teams. You know, we're ranked 14 and 15 now, which is about where we should be. Do either one of us have a chance to do anything spectacular in the postseason? Probably not.
And don't tell Shea Patterson that. See that article?
I did not.
That Holly, the girl that does like the sideline reporting, said something. How's it feel? And he goes, "Oh, I think we're still on track for all of our, our goals for the season." She goes, "Do you still think you make the playoffs?" And he said, and he laughed at her and said, "What do you think?" or something, or "Of course," or something like that. And then one of the other broadcasters like, "Well, Holly, maybe you should have laughed at him, saying no, there's no chance for you getting the playoffs."
No. Yeah. I mean, is there a chance? Yeah, 1 in a million. Yeah. So you're telling me there's a chance? All right. Well, since we're on the baseball talk, the postseason is done. So of course the off season and the hot stove gets fired up, and there's been a lot of. I wasn't able this weekend to kind of catch the, who the teams, picked up their option, turned down their option. The players that did the same thing. We've got plenty of time to get into that. But we kind of mentioned, starting at the top. So there's been a lot of new coaches. Some of them very surprising, some of them not so surprising. But I figured we would kind of, and there's some of these that Kyle and I have talked about, so I wanted to get your 2 cents in. And the one I don't think surprised anybody was, I was kind of surprised that the Cubs let Madden walk. I get maybe they've grown apart.
I think they're button heads a little bit between him and the front office.
I think so. And Joe Madden's one of those guys. He can go coach where the fuck he wants.
Yeah, I just need a new voice. Like I still say this. I still think he's the best manager in baseball.
Yeah,
I really do.
He's one of the top 2 or 3 for me. So I mean, hands down. But they hired David Ross, and every Cubs fan will tell you that maybe David Ross's voice out of that clubhouse is what's been missing as far as the chemistry and as far as everything else, which might be true. He's the kind of the father figure to the team, best friends with Anthony Rizzo.
And that's where I think it's going to come up to Biden, because they'll treat him as a friend, not a manager. I don't know. It could work 2 ways. I'm not sure.
The true test to me is when it's probably 3rd inning. Lester's on the mound. Lester's having a chunker, but he's working through. I mean, he's it's a Lester outing. He's working through it, but he's up to 70, 80 pitches in the 3rd inning. Ross has to go get him. For those of you that don't remember, Ross was his personal catcher. I mean, even going back to when he was with Boston at times. So they have a great relationship now. Kind of piggybacking off your point, has he been away long enough, or do the players respect him enough to not pitch a fit?
That's what I'll be interested to watch and see.
Because if they do, and if the team welcomes him as a coach and not as a best friend, I don't see anything wrong with this. I think everything, there's nothing but positives. Like I said, the only negative is, and I'm right there with you, is how is the friendship, mentorship?
Yeah, there's going to have to be a fine line that, they're going to have to set boundaries on things. So David Ross, he was obviously a catcher. I think he knows the game pretty well.
Hell of a dancer, too.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, looking at it, was David Ross a great player? No.
He'll be the first to admit it.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. But I think people respect him because his knowledge for the game. All the games he's caught, everything, being on that World Series team. But I just, after watching, some interviews with some players and stuff, I really wonder what it's going to be like in that clubhouse. Is it going to be, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want? Because what's he going to do, yell at me?
Yeah. Because we're going to go have beers afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, like I said, it could be one of the greatest hires of the year. Who knows? But I just can't emphasize it enough. I think the the Phillies getting Girardi, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Gabe Kapler was in over his head.
Yeah. Well, I think Gabe Kapler would be a very good manager one day,
Mm-hmm.
but to have might not have been the right roster for him to come into.
And the dude's jacked too.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's jacked. Spend some more time in the gym. Get everything tuned out.
Yep.
He'll be back.
Yep. And he's one of those guys that, he's young, not too far removed from the game. The game's still fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people could say that, Girardi's behind the times. The Yankees, when he was there, they didn't dive too far into analytics. They didn't do a whole lot of shifting. He kind of ran that with an iron fist type instead of like the Joe Madden being the more like bring your personality to the game.
Yep.
And would be kind of cool to see maybe Girardi wants to grow a goatee, maybe a beard. Because
you'll be able to.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see. And there's a lot of analysts who are like, well, I don't know how he'll do with Bryce. You fucking kidding me? Look at every ego that was in that Yankee dugout, and he kept them together.
Yeah.
They were in, they won a World Series. We're in the playoffs, I think, all but the last 2 years he was there. And maybe the last year. But, that's when Rivera retired, Jeter retired, and A-Rod, that whole thing. So you're looking at a lot of leadership.
Yeah. He dealt with a lot of crap.
Yeah. And in my opinion, dealt with it amazingly. You never heard of any of his players doing anything stupid.
And to follow somebody like Joe Torre, how are you going to do that? That's a lose-lose.
I think he did it magically and did it as best as he could.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you don't win a World Series, you're a failure.
Right.
And that's just how the Yankees are, though, period. But then you have a manager come in right after Joe Torre, and
you never want it. Well, it's kind of like Didi coming in after Jeets.
Yep.
And I think Didi's been doing just fine.
Fantastic, yeah. Doing
just fine. And next on the list, Angels get their guy in Joe Madden.
It's a good hire.
I this is one of the ones that Kyle and I talked about. I didn't know his past with the organization. I just felt like, Madden's more of the progressive type of thinker. We're in the United States where that benefit the most, LA, and both Kyle and I were, pretty adamant, thumping our chests, like, San Diego, hire this motherfucker. Hire this motherfucker, which I still think would have been amazing. But when it comes down to it, I think he's the perfect manager to try to get a grasp on this, on Ohtani. He's got the best player in the fucking world.
Yeah, they're lacking pitching. That's been their...
Yeah, and look what Madden did, especially when he was with Tampa.
Yeah.
If they give him long enough,
I think he'll have to go back to a lot of what he did in Tampa. Where in Chicago, he had way more talent than what he ever had.
Yeah.
So he could kind of take a step back, but I think he's gonna have to go back to what he was doing.
But in Chicago, it wasn't the homegrown talent.
No.
It was the bought and traded talent.
Yep.
Where and we even touched on it with Skaggs. It's unfortunate what happened with him, but I think he would be one of those ones that would benefit a lot from Joe Madden being there. And they do have some of those homegrown talent. So
they have some. It seems like all of their prospects that they're huge on are all outfielders. Every single one of them.
Which one of the outfield spots is going to be taken for quite a while.
Yeah. So there's going to be some trades. I guarantee it. Bring in some pitching. They need to solidify a shortstop position. They need another big bat for protection.
Is it Simmons there? And I know he's. Yeah, his stick isn't there all the time.
No, it's not what it was, a few years ago.
No, but defensively,
defensively he's a stud. But they need another big bat in the lineup. They need a lot of things, but pitching has got to be priority number one. And then I read that JD Martinez, LA, that'd be some good protection.
Yeah, especially if the Red Sox could keep Mookie Betts. I'd be all right with that.
Yeah,
I'd be all right with that. And like I said, I didn't know his his lineage with Mike Scioscia and all of that out there. So it's kind of a feel good story. They got who they wanted, and like you and I talked about, he could have went anywhere, and probably wrote his own check.
Yep.
So for them to get their guys, he was the first domino to fall, which I think as soon as he left Chicago, everyone knew where he was going. And he entertained some interviews here and there, but I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion.
Maybe it was either. I had a gut feeling that he might end up with the Mets. That was like my first thought. My first thought was New York Mets, but I mean, shoot, with that pitching staff they have out there, talk about underachievers.
Yes. Then even the young studs in the field with Alonso and all that, they're a very young team. That wouldn't have been a bad fit either.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of the Mets, I think the shocker for the whole list here is Carlos Beltran. Carlos Beltran. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know he was looking to be a manager.
He might have been on their bench last year.
He might have. All right. So I didn't know he had any experience. To be honest with you,
he might have been.
So, I mean, like David Ross.
Yeah. You knew he was going to coach sometime.
Yeah. It's kind of like Veritek.
Yep.
It's just when and where.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people that were up in arms that the Red Sox didn't hire him. And they hired Cora.
Mm-hmm.
But the Red Sox were bringing up our point. They don't think he was
just yet. Yep.
He wasn't far enough removed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's going to be a wild card. And of course I think one of the reasons Mickey Callaway isn't around anymore is he wasn't playing ball with the executives there.
Yep.
He wanted to do his thing.
Yep.
So let's see if Beltran is actually allowed to manage, or is he just going to be a fucking puppet?
Yeah.
If he's just going to be a puppet, then you could have put anybody in there.
Yep.
No,
nothing's going to change.
And it's sad because you're going to waste prime years in these stud careers, and maybe with their trading for Stroman last year, kind of solidified that they're not tanking, and they're legit about moving forward. But they still have to overcome the Braves in that division, obviously the Nats. So, do they have the tools to do it? Absolutely.
Don't count out the Phillies, though, man.
No.
Phillies are going to be there too.
No, that NL East is going to be savage, except for the Marlins.
Yeah,
Thank you, Derek Jeter. Poor Don Mattingly.
Yeah.
Don Mattingly's like, Jesus.
Yeah. Donnie Baseball. Yeah, he's getting a bad rap right now.
Right now, he's Donnie Paychecks.
Yeah.
Seems about the only reason Jeets keeps him around.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, hey, if you're getting paid to do that, more power to you. And then, you and I were talking before we hit record here. The Royals get their guy in Mike Matheny, which I think is a very sneaky good hire. I think the Cards, kind of let up on him too early.
Yep, I agree 110% on that.
But hindsight,
they did just fine.
Yeah. They ended up just fine.
Yeah,
so
I mean, Cardinals are always going to be that steady franchise.
Yeah,
just like the Giants, they're always just going to be steady. Mike Matheny, it's a good hire.
And again, another catcher.
Yeah.
Another catcher.
Yeah, like I was telling you earlier, I said I actually read his book, which, that means I actually sat down and read a book. I was glued to it. The guy,
without crayons.
Yeah. Well, debatable. I colored on some pages. Yeah. The guy, he's just, I wasn't listening, but just seeing and, kind of gathering what he sees in the game and what he does, how he feels about things. I was like, man, I really like this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this guy. And I ended up reading that book in like a week. And
was it like 64 pages?
32.
Okay.
But yeah, it's phenomenal. But he'll do well. I like Ned Yost. I liked him.
I was a big Ned Yost fan too.
But like we said, it's just time for another voice.
And I think what made that the Ned Yost, the break in the relationship was, I think they were the team was going in one direction and he wanted to go the other.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything bad happened on either parties. It's just that
when you don't
this
bring
isn't
back
the right time.
You don't bring back, Lorenzo Cain, Moustakas, all those guys, that core that won you the World Series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the writing was on the wall. The only one they kept was Salvador Perez.
Yeah,
and Alex Gordon's still there.
No, actually, speaking of the players' options and everything, they didn't extend Gordon as options. So he's a free agent.
He is. I mean, I was talking about last year.
Yeah.
He's probably 35, 36 years old though too. But
Salvador was hurt all year, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was hurt, and he's a young catcher too. So I think that'll be a good
stud.
Yeah, that'll be a good combination with those two.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, shit. You go from Yachty to Salvi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you're
two of the best in the business.
Yeah, and Salvador Perez is probably one of the best arms, south of Pudge that I've ever seen.
And he can hit.
Yeah,
dude can hit.
Yeah, Yachty had a couple years there where his hitting wasn't, but I mean, I think it had a lot to do with his thumb, chronic thumb injuries and stuff. This year he was healthy and raked. I mean, for a catcher, raked. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I didn't even think about that part of it, but yeah, you're very right. And then lastly, to wrap up on this list, the Padres get their guy, Jace Tingler.
Tickler.
Of course, they had Andy Green there. I don't know who the fuck Andy Green was either. But I actually had to Google who the fuck Jace Tingler. He was one of the player development coaches for like the last 4 or 5 years in the Texas Rangers organization. And if you Google Mr. Tingler, it'll say his name, then first time MLB head coach. And you're like, no shit.
Yeah.